What's going on YouTube? It's Deej, back again with another video, and today we are reacting to Daniel Jeremiah's 2023 Mock Draft 2.0. Always excited to see what Jeremiah wants to talk about, what he wants to put in his new mock draft. So I know I'm a little late getting to this, but of course this weekend I put out my latest mock draft, so definitely go back and check that out if you missed it. But always excited to see what Jeremiah has to say. Let's go ahead and jump into this reaction. There was only one pick that I had spoiled for me, but we'll talk about it pretty early on in this video. But he has the Bears sticking and picking and taking Jalen Carter. I think this upcoming weekend, I'm going to do the same thing just because I think there's more than a 0% chance that it happens, if Houston, I think it's a smokescreen, but if they're legitimately considering maybe signing a Garoppolo and taking the best defensive player available, Anderson or Jalen Carter at 2, then even the trade back to 4 for Chicago gets a little scary because they want to position themselves, it seems like at least, to still be able to get a Carter or an Anderson. I don't know. We'll obviously talk about Tyree Wilson here in a little bit and some of the love that he's getting. So maybe no matter what, the move to 4 makes sense. But, maybe if you're Chicago, you're like, hey, there's only one way we guarantee ourselves to get Jalen Carter, and that's by sticking and picking at 1. So maybe they do this. And if they do, I'd be a little bummed out because I'd love to see them get those assets, kind of kick this rebuild into ultra high gear, right? Like, I just think Ryan Poles is onto something. He's done a great job. Obviously, this thinking last offseason, shedding those contracts, taking a bunch of dead cap hits, has positioned this team so well. And really the only move that he's made so far that I'm like, would you like to try that again, is the Chase Claypool trade. But I think part of that's also the Packers driving the price up. Apparently that was supposed to be Chicago's second, but because the Packers kind of got involved, that became Chicago was going to give up the Ravens second. Ultimately had to give up their own because the Packers got involved. So that's the one kind of misfire so far for Ryan Poles. So I'd like to see them be able to move down, get more assets, and see what Poles would do with that. But if they feel like they have to stick at 1 to get Jalen Carter, I'm not mad about it. Then we get to the Texans. They take Bryce Young. And I mean, I do think it is a smokescreen for Houston talking about taking the best defensive player. But we'll know in free agency, right? Like, in a world where Rodgers goes to Vegas and Derek Carr goes to New York, let's just say, where does Jimmy G fit into the mix? Because I think he makes a lot of sense to go to the Raiders. Maybe San Francisco opts to bring him back and they do move on from Trey Lance. That feels a little unlikely. Maybe Tennessee and they want to move on from Tannehill. Maybe Tampa Bay and then like the pseudo let's run it back effort. And maybe Houston, right? Like I think Bobby Slowick, their new OC. Every time there's a San Francisco connection, a lot of people want to enable that into why Garoppolo makes sense. Honestly, to me, it almost makes the opposite true because I bet Bobby Slowick's like, I know what Jimmy Garoppolo is and we need to do better. Like, we've seen San Francisco take a swing of the bat to get a Trey Lance, continue to address position even in the 7th round with a Brock Purdy, obviously thinking he would be a backup long term. But nonetheless, like, people in San Francisco's organization were trying to move on from Garoppolo, thus Trey Lance being the number 3 overall pick back in 2021. So you could use Bobby Slowick as the OC and D'Amico Ryans coming from San Francisco as a way to enable Jimmy G going to Houston. But I almost think that those guys know better than anybody that Jimmy G's just not enough to win a Super Bowl. So I don't know. It could break either way. Ultimately, again, I do think it's a smokescreen that Houston's throwing out there to try to bait basically Chicago into taking Jalen Carter at 1. So that way they can still get Bryce Young, who I do believe is the number 1 player on their board, and they can get him at 2. Don't have to move up or anything like that. So if it were to play out like this, one of the biggest winners of the draft will be the Houston Texans. Then we get to the Arizona Cardinals, and this is, of course, the pick that I had spoiled. So Tyree Wilson going 3 over Will Anderson. And this kind of harkens back to the Aiden Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker conversation last year. So they're different players, but allow me to use that as an analogy here. Aiden Hutchinson at Indy was a freak in all but one category, arm length. And then Trayvon Walker at 6'5", 275, runs this unbelievable 40. He showcases the bend with a 3-cone. The guy's basically built out of a lab to be a high-level NFL edge rusher. He has every single trait. He's like 99th percentile in height, frame, and just about every athletic measurable for that position. So because Hutchinson's lacking in one specific category, I guess the Jags kind of saw that as their opportunity to swing for a bigger opportunity here, swing for the fences and go for the upside with Trayvon Walker. And Will Anderson, the tape, he's the number 1 edge in this class. To me, he's the second best non-quarterback in the class, but it's really 1A, 1B with him and Carter. And I like Tyree Wilson, but to me, it's not close between Will Anderson. He's a blue chipper. Tyree Wilson, I think, comes with a little bit of work to be done. Therefore, he can't be a blue chipper. So I do think Will Anderson would be the pick here, but getting back to that analogy between Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker last year and how it applies this year, the one knock against Will Anderson is going to be the fact that he's 240, 245 pounds. Maybe he bulks up for the combine. Like if he gets to 255 for the combine and still runs a pretty good 40 and still looks like he has that burst and explosiveness, then I think that the argument goes by the wayside. But Tyree Wilson's 6'6", 280, 285 maybe, and has an almost 80-inch wingspan, which is bananas. So that is going to be something compared to 6'4", 245, let's say, for Will Anderson. That's going to be something that says, okay, well, maybe there is a little bit more upside with Wilson. Like, I could see that being used as an enabling factor to maybe prioritize Wilson over Will Anderson. That being said, Will Anderson specifically as a run defender does not play like he's 245 pounds. He legitimately plays like he's got at least another 10, 15 pounds. He stops the run at a high level. So again, I think it's a kind of a nonsensical route to go down. To me, Will Anderson's a better football player than Tyree Wilson. But I could see, based off traits and upside, where, maybe the conversation still needs to be had. So it's interesting. And I don't doubt that Jeremiah is hearing a lot of hype. Like, Daniel Jeremiah is as plugged in as it gets. Like, when he's hearing things like this, you can't knock Jeremiah. You have to knock the people telling him this information and where he's getting this from. So, I believe that Jeremiah is getting this intel, and I believe that there's NFL teams that maybe do look at Wilson better than Anderson. I just think that's blasphemous. Then we get to the Colts. And again, that comes from somebody who likes Tyree Wilson. But anyways, we get on to the Indianapolis Colts here. And I do think, CJ Stroud, the more I think about it, him and Levis both could totally be Chris Ballard guys, but I am maybe kind of leaning towards Stroud being their guy. I don't know. I go back and forth every day, but the Indianapolis Colts would be another big winner if Chicago sticks and picks at 1, because it guarantees them one of the top 3 quarterbacks. You could get into a weird world maybe where Carolina moves up to 1, and maybe the Raiders, if they miss out on Aaron Rodgers, moves up to 3. That could be an interesting possibility. Maybe a mock I'll explore later on once we get deeper into free agency. We'll see if that's even like something that could make sense. But by being able to stay here at 4, you're keeping assets in your pocket, right, which would certainly make Chris Ballard happy. And then you're guaranteed one of those top 3 quarterbacks, which I'd be so interested. I'd love to know once we get to the combine, like, if anybody can leak out what that order of quarterback ranking is for the Indianapolis Colts. If there's one team I could see their quarterback rankings, I would want to see what the Colts have it as right now. Because to me, they are the biggest, kind of domino to fall once it comes to the draft. Are they moving up to 1? Are they sticking and picking? Who do they have as that quarterback 1? Because if it's Levis, do you need to move up to 1? Maybe, maybe not. If it's Bryce Young, then I definitely think you do. Is it CJ Stroud? Can you stay at 4? All those different possibilities. So obviously we're not going to have that type of information get leaked out. But if there was one team I could see their draft board, and specifically their quarterback position rankings, I'd want to see what Indy's is. But hey, you stick and pick and get Stroud here at 4. That is certainly a big win for the Colts. Seattle Seahawks take Will Anderson Jr. Yeah, they would be a huge winner here by Wilson going 3 and Anderson falling into their laps. Granted, this would, give them another smaller, lighter edge rusher. I don't want to call him small because, hey, Will Anderson's 6'4", and I'm not even 6'2", so, who am I to call him small? More so that he's light, in that 240, 245 pound mark. Kind of have Uchenna Nwosu right around the same mark. And then Boye Mafe is kind of a DPR as of right now, not a high-level run defender and also a lighter guy. So that would be the one downside. But the upside would be getting a blue chipper in this class and getting an immediate boost there at the edge position. And then now you can have a rotation where it's primarily going to be Uchenna Nwosu, Will Anderson as your main 2 on the edge, and then you can work Boye Mafe in as a DPR. That pass rush gets really, really scary. So this would obviously be an ideal situation for Seattle. The Lions take Myles Murphy. Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. I've kind of had Murphy starting to slide back towards the back half of the top 10, but I still think 6 makes a lot of sense. The ability to be that 3-4 DN kicked in between Lee McNeil and then James Houston and Aiden Hutchinson, depending on what side of the ball he's on. I think that makes a lot of sense. Could go corner here, but I certainly think edge is live, and maybe then you can lean into the cornerback depth in this class and just get a guy at 18, or even trade back from a spot and still get a guy at the mid-20s or something like that, wherever they trade back to. So I think this route makes a lot of sense. The Lions and the Seahawks are these 2 teams, these mock drafts that I have so much fun with because they have so much assets already in their pockets, and they have so much ammunition for this draft that they can do a crazy move up and go make a splash play, or they can continue to trade back, and then you're just accumulating picks and you're adding this fit, you're making that addition to the roster, you're filling up that hole. It becomes really fun to do as you're doing these mocks. So a lot of different routes those 2 teams can go down to, which also makes it really exciting. Then we get to the Raiders. Will Levis, if they miss out on Rodgers, honestly, I think Levis would probably be their top guy. I could totally see McDaniels buying into the tools and the traits, and hey, I got Will Levis as my QB2, so, give me the heat down below in the comment section. I know I'm higher on Levis than most, but I do think there is something to work with there, and I'd love to see what that McDaniels pairing with Levis would look like. Additionally, you look at the Kentucky supporting cast this past year, no real NFL talent outside of Chris Rodriguez, so to put Will Levis in a situation where got some work to do on the offensive line, but comparing that, even comparatively speaking, to Kentucky, where they were in the SEC versus the Raiders' offensive line, like better and better down the stretch last year, that's at least a net even, if not maybe a smidge better. I don't know. I I think the Raiders' offensive line is going to figure itself out this offseason. And then the biggest boost would be Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, types of talents that he just didn't have, even again, comparatively speaking at the NFL level. He just didn't have a guy that could be an alpha dude this past year like a Devontae Adams. He didn't have a freaky tight end like a Darren Waller. Didn't have a go-to option out of the slot like a Hunter Renfrow. So I think this would be an awesome situation, a great place for Levis to land. It would certainly make me very interested in the Raiders next year. So I would love to see this play out. Let me get to the Falcons. Lucas Van Ness. Yeah, I don't doubt that he's a top 10 guy. Right now, like, top 10, top 12 feels live. I certainly don't think he gets past the Packers at 15. I think that's kind of the floor for Lucas Van Ness. Really interesting blend of some bendy ability, but that get off on the line, the fact he's a redshirt sophomore, and then turning that get off on the line into explosiveness. And again, a guy who's still young. So he's going to continue to get stronger. He's going to continue to get better. And also a guy at Iowa that, I don't want to say he was playing the wrong position, but he's not going to play D tackle. Like, this is a 3-4 DN, so maybe you can play Grady Jarrett at the other DN spot, or maybe Jarrett plays a little bit more on the nose, and you can pair these two up next to each other. I'm interested by that. You could also, I think, have the flexibility to just have Van Ness be an outside edge rusher. So I think in a base, a 3-4, he's probably that DN for the Falcons. But once you get into passing situations, your nickel and dime sets, he becomes, a hand-in-the-dirt edge rusher of sorts. So him and, Arnold Ebiketie as a 1-2 edge duo in those passing formations, that's a really nice, pairing. And then to have Grady Jarrett there in the middle, all of a sudden that Falcons pass rush feels like it's figured itself out. Granted, we've been saying that for like a decade now, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. Let me get to the Carolina Panthers. Peter Skoronski. Wow, that's an interesting one. And I wonder if this would be for a guard spot, because Ikem Ekwonu got better week over week. Like, he went from this guy who was really struggling early last year to one of the most promising tackles in the NFL by the end of the year. And of course, Taylor Moton, who's making a lot of money and a really good right tackle. So yeah, I don't really think Brady Christensen played all that bad at left guard either. So this is kind of an interesting one, but you could plug Skoronski in at any one of those 5 offensive line positions. To me, that's like the best value that Skoronski brings. Like, he's a good football player, and you want to draft good football players, but the fact that he was recruited to Northwestern to play center, I certainly think he can play guard, or you can play either tackle position. The ability to have him be one of your 5 best offensive linemen and ensure you can get him on the field, that's where his draft value really comes from, on top of being a pretty good prospect. So I would be fascinated if Carolina made this pick, and I have no idea where he'd plug in on that line. It's somewhere there on the interior, which, hey, that'd be cool. And if you're a Panthers fan, be kind of a bummer to go top 10 using those picks on the offensive line 2 years in a row. But sometimes it's not the sexy picks that make you the best team. And, maybe Peter Skoronski is kind of that missing piece to take, what's already becoming a strength into like an ultra strength, and that becomes your identity of a team. Who knows? Anyways, let's get to pick 10, the Philadelphia Eagles, Devon Witherspoon. Man, I almost think Christian Gonzalez could be a better fit, but we'll see who the DC ends up being in Philadelphia. And Witherspoon, Gonzalez, I kind of go back and forth between them as my top corner, with Joey Porter Jr. kind of lingering just ever so slightly behind those guys. But that top trio is insane. I don't know why my screen keeps glitching like that. NFL.com, you're selling me here. But anyways, corner for the Falcons, I think makes a lot of sense. Bradbury going to be a free agent this year at 30. I don't know how much you really want to invest, $18-20 million in a quarterback in his 30s, especially considering Darius Slay has already kind of been a big financial investment in his 30s, right? So I don't know if you really want to double down on that. So I'd like to see them get younger and cheaper at the position and invest, a top 10 pick. Plus, this isn't even their selection. So you just get the opportunity to take the first corner off the board with the Saints pick. Seems like a big win to me if you're Philadelphia. Titans take Paris Johnson Jr. Yep, to me, the best offensive tackle in this class. Skoronski gives you that crazy versatility, but so does Paris Johnson Jr. Right guard, then moved to left tackle this past year at Ohio State. To me, I think that speaks volumes that the Buckeyes are like, this is one of our 5 best offensive linemen. We have got to get him on the field. So I think he could play either tackle spot, maybe you could kick him inside to guard, but I think you're kind of wasting the real upside that is there as him being a potential superstar left tackle. So for the Titans here, makes a ton of sense. This is your Taylor Lewan replacement, an immediate upgrade over Dennis Daly, who I also believe is a free agent. So right now, you kind of don't have anybody to play that spot. So go ahead and draft, to me, the best offensive tackle in this class. Makes a lot of sense. And plus, you can get a speed receiver. You can also double down on, interior offensive line help on day 2. And, that's been kind of the path that I've been following for the Titans, whether it's tackle, wide receiver, and then edge, or tackle, wide receiver, interior offensive line. I think that's kind of the route that the Titans could use their top 100 picks on. Next up is the Texans, Jordan Addison. If you're a Houston fan, let me know where you stand on Addison versus Quentin Johnston. I'd love to know that. I think I've asked that before, and it's been kind of mixed, but continue to let me hear your feedback. I'd be interested. I have Johnston as my number 1 wide receiver, but that being said, Addison is my wide receiver too. It's close between him and Zay Flowers, but Addison is certainly the most NFL ready day one guy, him and Flowers to me, or even more. Those two guys together are both more NFL ready than I think Johnston is right now. It's more so about what he could potentially come in a year's time or 2 years' time. So I'd love to see Houston get Addison to be that number one alpha in the wide receiver room. John Mechie III comes back. He's your slot wide receiver. And then Nico Collins kind of becomes this vertical, big body, Gabe Davis, Donovan Peoples-Jones types. And honestly, if you added Jordan Addison, this wide receiver room starts to make me think about Cleveland, right? Like Addison in this Amari Cooper-esque type of role, Nico Collins and Donovan Peoples-Jones, obviously some overlap there. I've been trying to get the Browns slot wide receivers in my mock, so we'll see who that becomes. But John Mechie III, I think, is an awesome kind of, I don't want to say addition to the offense, but we haven't seen him play yet. Obviously, we're hoping that recovery from leukemia is going well, but this will be the first opportunity we see him. So, yeah, he kind of is an addition this offseason for the Texans, despite him being drafted last year. So I'd love to see him in the mix, plus Addison. It feels like it would pole vault that passing game a ton. Plus Bobby Slowick, I'm excited to see him as the OC for Houston. Then the Jets, they take Broderick Jones. I think this makes a ton of sense. Honestly, I'm starting to map out, and tomorrow you're going to see my fix the franchise in the New York Jets. So definitely come back if you're more interested in some more Jets talk. But yeah, I think the best route that the Jets could take for that offensive line is you let Fant, you let Brown go. You try to run it back with Mekhi Becton. I think you give him one more year. As much as I totally understand if they want to move on from him, I wouldn't hate it whatsoever. I think if you draft a tackle at 13, run it back with Mekhi Becton, maybe move him to right tackle, or if Skoronski falls to you at 13, Skoronski could be your right tackle, Becton sticks at left. And then you have Max Mitchell as this kind of ready-to-go swing tackle. And, honestly, Max Mitchell, despite, I liked him a ton in college, but I just didn't think his body and his arm length were going to hold up at the NFL level. He was better than I expected last year, so him as a swing tackle I don't hate, but I also think you could double down at tackle in the fourth round or something like that. Kind of like what they did with Mitchell last year, honestly. He was a day 3 pick on a guy who maybe falls a little bit, kind of like what the Packers did with Zach Tom, and we saw how that turned out. So I could see that being the final kind of reinforcement. So you draft a tackle at 13, pair him up with Becton. If Becton doesn't work out, he gets hurt, you have Max Mitchell. But also maybe take one more day 3 swing of the bat at the position just in case things get really, wonky like they did last year in New York. Then the Patriots, Christian Gonzalez, sorry. I've gone Quentin Johnston a ton. And Christian Gonzalez, I think this would be an awesome route for the Patriots to go. Tackle, corner, wide receiver, or Brian Branch as this, nickel corner safety hybrid. I love those types of first-round picks for the Patriots. Where I was going and why I said Quentin Johnston was Gonzalez and Johnston. Dudes that big should not move the way that they do. And Johnston's ability to go win in the air is also unreal when you consider his shiftiness and his speed. Gonzalez's ability to just glide to the football. It's something to just watch. Like if you don't watch a whole lot of film, I implore you to go check out some Christian Gonzalez highlights because it's unbelievable. And I think he comes with man zones, flexibility. I think he can play in either scheme. So depending on what route the Patriots want to go, I think Gonzalez makes a lot of sense. Whether they want to run it back and kind of go Bill Belichick of old, be more of a man press team. I think Gonzalez could do that. Or if they want to stick with their more recent trends of the last couple of years, being a little bit more zone heavy. Hey, the NFL itself is about 2-to-1 zone to man ratio, so it's kind of moving that direction as is. So I think Gonzalez would be an awesome addition there. So I wouldn't hate this pick whatsoever. Then the Packers take Dalton Kincaid. So Kincaid, the first tight end off the board. Man, he's got his fans, man. And I don't hate it. Like this tight end group is actually really, really good. It's been a while since we've had a really solid tight end class. And Kincaid is a really good athlete. A little bit smaller than Luke Musgrave, and that was kind of my point of differentiation why I had Musgrave as my tight end 3 and Kincaid as my 4. I just think Musgrave projects a little bit better as a blocker at 6'6", 250 versus Kincaid at like 6'3", 235, 240. Nonetheless, I do think he can be a competent blocker. I think he's probably a little bit better off than in a zone blocking scheme. Either way, you're drafting Kincaid here, especially if you took him at 15. You're drafting him because of his receiving ability. And he is a good fluid mover, and he's also a tank to bring down. That was a huge part of the Utah offense, his yards after catch ability. So I don't think he should be the first tight end off the board. Again, I have him as tight end 4, so I would go in a different direction here. And, that being said, if Rodgers is gone, maybe this is finally the offseason that we see Green Bay go pass catcher in the first round. Like maybe it takes losing Aaron Rodgers for them to change their ways. I kind of hope so, but if they're going to go tight end here, go ahead and take Michael Mayer. Because to me, Michael Mayer is a blue chipper, despite not being a high-end athlete. It's just tough because he plays tight end. So where do you put a blue chip tight end? That's kind of tricky to find out. Let's move on to pick 16, the Washington Commanders. Joey Porter Jr. Yep, I think this is a fantastic fit in that Del Rio defense. And also, like I said earlier, he's right behind Gonzalez and Witherspoon. Like that top 3 in this cornerback class is awesome. Like, I don't think you really go wrong with any of those three. Long arms, I think he's going to test pretty well. Maybe not as gaudy as like Gonzalez, but I think he'll have solid numbers at Indy. And a guy who's just gotten better and better and better at Penn State. I want to see that continuation at the NFL level. If I'm an NFL franchise, I'm buying into that and making an investment in Joey Porter Jr. right around mid-first round. I think this is a good value for him. Then at 17, the Steelers take Darnell Wright. Yeah, I've seen this in a couple mocks. I'm not as crazy about it because to me, trust me, I'm not a big Chukwuma Okorafor fan. I think he's, I like PFF's grades, but I think they kind of boost up Chukwuma Okorafor a little too much, if you ask me. But to me, if they're going to find a tackle replacement, I think Dan Moore is the guy to get replaced. So to me, Wright is more of a right tackle exclusively, no pun intended. So it could give you an upgrade there on the offensive line, and that's the most important thing. Like, I think all 5 positions of the Steelers O-line can be overhauled. So if you find an upgrade, don't be too picky about it. Get an upgrade right. But I'd like to see it be on the left tackle side. So Antoine Harrison is my OT3. I have him even over Broderick Jones, so that would be my preference here. But they did go Darnell Wright. It's an upgrade to that offensive line. I can't knock that because it is something they need to improve upon. Then the Lions taking Anthony Richardson. Lions fans, let me hear what you think about this. I know a lot of Detroit fans are invested in Goff, but I'm sorry, he's still Jared Goff. Like, I think Ben Johnson deserves the bulk load of that credit last year. Plus Amon-Ra St. Brown being a freak and that offensive line being awesome. And then Jamal Williams, having that type of dude in the red zone, I think goes a long way. So I still don't think Goff is the long-term answer. I know he looked good last year, but I still think he's not a great decision maker, more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws last year, to use some PFF stats. So that's ultimately the issue. So if they wanted to make an investment in Anthony Richardson, give Goff one more year, also think about what that could mean. Like, if you have Goff play another year, then he gets signed somewhere else, you could get a comp pick for it. So that's kind of alluring here. And then that paves the way for Anthony Richardson to eventually become the QB of the future. So I know a lot of Lions fans are focused on that defense, but if Anthony Richardson fell into your lap in 18, you didn't have to move up to get him. Are you pulling the trigger here? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to see them make this move. I just don't think that they will. The Buccaneers take Bijan Robinson. Yeah, this is kind of like becoming the cop-out to where Bijan goes. As much as it was like the Bills and the Eagles earlier on in the draft cycle, Bijan's too good to go outside the top 20. He's too good to go outside the top 20. So that's why the Bucs continues to be like them, and then the Lions at 18 actually are just spots where it's like, I don't know where to put Bijan. I'm just going to have him go there because him behind that Lions offensive line would be bananas awesome. And then for the Bucs, it's like, yeah, I mean, they prioritized the run game way too much last year. So even with Byron Leftwich gone, maybe that's still somewhere in their thinking in that front office. So also, they can certainly do better than Leonard Fournette. And Rachaad White was all right last year, but yeah, they can definitely do better there. Bijan also is just like a force. Like, the reason I still think he goes top 20 despite being a running back, and this is coming from a Steelers fan who wasn't crazy about the Najee Harris first-round pick. Loved Najee as a person, but don't think he was really worth the first-rounder, given Pittsburgh's situation at the time. But Bijan, man, not only are you getting the best pure running back in this class, a guy who can win with his elusiveness, win with his power, has great long speed, great shifty, short area ability as well. This guy is a legitimate great pass catcher, a really sharp route runner out of the backfield. And I think you can do some stuff with him in the slot. Not necessarily something we saw a ton of him doing at Texas, but I do think he can project to do some of what you see Christian McCaffrey do. I legitimately think that's in his toolbox. So adding him into a Bucs offense would be really interesting, and especially if they keep Mike Evans and Chris Godwin around, and Russell Gage is still there for another year. What could Bijan do as a pass catcher, and how could that open up that offense for whoever the quarterback is? I'd love to find out. Seahawks at 20, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Yeah, this is one I'm starting to actually really fall in love with. This is a fit that I'm starting to really dig. So if you're a Seahawks fan, let me know what you think about wide receiver in the first round. If I do go wide receiver for the Seahawks, I tend to make it with their last second round pick, after I've kind of hit a lot of defensive work, because they certainly could get better on that defensive side. But man, JSN is like a true slot wide receiver who works the underneath and intermediate stuff, wins with his route running, good hands, basically just being a safety outlet, especially for a team that I think could also use a tight end upgrade. Maybe you just repurpose that, and Jackson Smith and Jigba serves that role in your offense. And then you have two vertical-based guys like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett that clear out DBs to work deep down the field, so then the underneath and intermediate stuff's more open for JSN. Man, I'm really coming around to this. So it might be something you see pretty soon in my mocks. But if you're a Seahawks fan, definitely let me know what you think down below. I'm not crazy about Jackson Smith and Jigba, so that's if I get excited about a fit with him, it's because I think that there's a spot where he can live in the slot. I do think that's ultimately his role at the NFL level. And I think the Seahawks kind of need that guy in their offense and kind of give JSN exactly what they need. So I also think when Tyler Lockett, eventually they move on from him, I think JSN can be a high volume slot guy, kind of like Amon-Ra St. Brown and kind of like Keenan Allen for the Chargers. So also honorable mentions to, the Chargers, the next pick. If Keenan Allen is cut, like JSN to the Chargers makes a ton of sense too. But nonetheless, I think once you move on from Lockett, you could have a 1-2 punch of, JSN in the slot, and of course DK Metcalf being this, freaky, field stretching, uber athletic tank of a human being, but also that slant for DK is insane. So I like this pick now for Seattle, but also long term. Quentin Johnson goes to the Chargers. Man, this would be awesome. this fit would be fantastic. Great yards after the catch guy. So I do think like Kellen Moore would get a lot of value as a satellite weapon out of Johnston. So I think that'd be pretty cool. He's certainly slippery and hard to bring down despite being, 6'4" and like 215 pounds. But, that's how he's built. But really the field stretching value is what you're looking for here. We saw it in moments this past year, really more in 2021. I just don't think TCU was like asking Johnston to be their guy. I just don't think that was an offense that was saying, hey, we need to make sure that Johnston gets 12 targets a game because that's how we're going to win games. Like, they did it in other ways. So pairing him up with Mike Williams, and if they can keep Keenan Allen and have him be the slot guy, oh my God, that wide receiver trio is insane. Johnston, Williams, and Keenan Allen, I'm totally here for it. But if this ultimately becomes something where Keenan Allen's cut, and then Johnston and Williams play the outside, and then that slot receiver becomes DeAndre Carter, maybe you get more Austin Eckler in that type of role, I'm here for that as well. So I would love to see this type of fit. Get that 4.3 speed, at worst, low 4.4 at 6'4", which is still insane, into this offense, because I certainly think the Chargers could use that. Then we get to the Ravens. Brian Branch. Yeah, I love Brian Branch, and I love just about anywhere I have him going mocks. This would be the one spot I'm not really crazy about. Kyle Hamilton was, PFF's top-graded safety last year. And even if you don't really care about PFF stats, like throw on the Ravens tape after he moved to the nickel and kind of played that slot corner, strong safety hybrid role, he became a force. And then that Ravens defense went from, good for the most part to really, really good. And they kind of hit their stride. And they became a really scary unit down the stretch. So to go Brian Branch here, that his role is basically already occupied by Kyle Hamilton, I just think you're getting too much overlap there. Maybe you could, kind of repurpose the role for Hamilton, and then Branch becomes that nickel corner, or maybe Branch plays somewhere else in the secondary, but you also made a major investment in Marcus Williams at free safety, so that really isn't the cards for Branch. So I just don't know where he can get on the field, if I'm honest. So don't hate it. And the Ravens do typically use 3 safeties, so maybe he just becomes the box guy. That could make some sense, but I'm kind of having a hard time figuring out where Branch would fit in the mix here for Baltimore. So I'm not really as crazy about this fit. As much as I love Brian Branch, this might be the one spot in the first round where I'm like, I think he could go somewhere better. Deonte Banks to the Vikings. Don't hate this whatsoever. It's interesting to see Banks over Keely Ringo and a Cam Smith. I still think I have those guys ahead of Banks, but there's a lot of athlete and a lot of excitement around Deonte Banks, largely because of his athletic, profile, but also 6'2" and right around 200 pounds. Don't think Maryland's, scheme necessarily had him in the best role, but this guy's a man press corner, which, Brian Flores now is the DC, certainly likes that type of stuff, but also has had a lot of success with, like a guy like Xavier Howard, who to me is one of the best zone corners in football. Like him and Jair Alexander kind of fit that, and Jalen Ramsey is a freak, so always got to include J-Ram in that conversation. But I'd be really excited to see what Brian Flores did with Deonte Banks. Would they become more of a zone team? Would they try to tap in his man press potential? I'd be fascinated by that. But corner is certainly a place where I think the Vikings can get better, so I wouldn't hate it here at 23. Jags go Brian Brzee. This is an interesting fit. I like it. I like plugging him in on the interior. We've seen the Jags take previous first-round swings at a guy like Taven Bryan, and obviously that did not work out. But adding that interior pass rush potential and add that type of juice, 6'5", 300 pounds, I like I've said 1,000 times, I think Brzee could stand to add a little bit of weight. But this is also a situation where it's like, hey, Josh Allen is already kind of the guy on that team, and they got some great play out of Arden Key. Hopefully they bring him back. And you talk about Trevon Walker, is this, he can play on the edge. He can also play that 3-4 DN spot. Brzee, maybe he plays some at nose. Maybe he's just playing the other 3-4 DN position. But, dude, if Walker and Brzee are on the same defensive line, that is one hell of a lot of potential across that defensive line that already features Arden Key playing pretty good, and Josh Allen is one of the better edge rushers in the AFC South. So, yeah, I am intrigued by this. There are certainly other positions where I think they can get more immediate impact. Brzee is certainly a little bit of a project, maybe take a year or two, but if it works out, him, Walker, and Allen, that defensive line looks really, really scary in Jacksonville, and it could set them up to become Saxonville once again. Then the Giants take Jalen Hyatt. Yeah, I'm admittedly not as big of a Jalen Hyatt guy as a lot of other people, so this may kind of deter you, but if you're a Hyatt fan, this is going to be a pick that excites you because you get that over-the-top speed that you haven't really seen the Giants fully be able to tap into with guys like, Sterling Shepard and others before him. So Hyatt's kind of another swing of the bat there. I don't think he has the most expansive route tree. Maybe that's just because, I talked about this with Cedric Tillman actually over the weekend with my mock. I just think Josh Heupel was like, hey, Jalen Hyatt, like, these are your 5 routes. Like, this is the role that I have for you. This is the limited route tree, but it's going to work because this is my offense and I know it works. Cedric Tillman, this is the stuff I need you to do. These are your routes. Do this. And it may not be a lot, but it's all we'll need. So I don't know if it's Jalen Hyatt doesn't or is incapable of expanding that route tree, or if Josh Heupel just didn't ask him to. I tend to think it's actually the latter versus the former. But nonetheless, I think this makes a lot of sense. Inside-out versatility. He played from the slot at Tennessee, but if you look at how wide receivers are aligned, outside guys are basically working from the sideline, and then slot wide receivers are basically at normal wide receiver outside alignment at the NFL level. So I think he comes with that inside-out versatility, which is key for me because JSN could be an awesome add to this offense, but what are you doing with Wan'Dale Robinson then? So I'd prefer to see them add someone like a Tank Dell or a Jordan Addison fell here, or even if they had to move up and get a Jordan Addison, love that. Say Flowers inside-out versatility, and same thing here with Jalen Hyatt. So I'd prefer them to see them prioritize that type of guy who can play on the outside versus a slot only like a JSN or a Josh Downs or something like that. Cowboys take Keon White. I don't hate this pick whatsoever. I do believe that they worked out an extension with Doran Armstrong. So the edge depth might not be the most immediate need for me, especially if you went off-ball linebacker here. Haven't seen Simpson or Sanders come off the board. And if you draft a guy there, re-sign Leighton Vander Esch, that allows you to keep Parsons at edge. And then that rotation becomes, Parsons, Sam Williams, Doran Armstrong, Tank Lawrence. Then it already becomes a pretty fleshed out D-end rotation. But taking a swing of the bat at a guy that's just now learning kind of the position and just now kind of hitting a stride, I'm here for that type of investment. So I'd like to see Keon White go to Dallas, and also a really good athlete, so I'd love to see him kind of incorporated to the stunts and twists that Dan Quinn has been using more and more every year. So I'd be excited by this. It wouldn't necessarily be the first team that I would think of, especially with how the board's played out. I think there's other areas, even though Cyrus Torrence, who's the next pick for the Bills, Steve Avila, if you have him as your top interior offensive lineman, I think he could be in play here, but Keon White wouldn't be a pick that I gave an F or anything like that by any stretch. Bills do take Cyrus Torrence. I think this makes a ton of sense. This is your Roger Saffold upgrade. This is what you wanted Roger Saffold to be. You got to fix up that interior offensive line. There was so much made about the Bengals offensive line heading into that divisional game, but the Bills offensive line was by far and away the weaker of the two offensive lines playing in that game. Maybe that's the snow, maybe it's the turf, the cleats. I don't really care. Make excuses. Both teams played on the same field. So, and the Bills offensive line was by far and away the weaker of the two. Also, I think this is a move to help have the run game be a bigger part of your offense. We started to see James Cook really kick it into high gear down the back half of last season, and having Torrance kind of pave the way at that left guard spot, I think makes it that much more dangerous. Michael Mayer to Bengals. I kind of had the same stuff happen in the first round this past weekend where it's just like, dude, if Michael Mayer is available there at 28, I know Bengals fans want to see secondary added. Totally, I agree with that. You could add another edge rusher for sure. Just go ahead and keep a strength of strength, and you're going to win a lot of games. You're going to be playing in front in a lot of games, so secondary and edge make a lot of sense. Offensive line, totally. Darnell Washington here, if Mayer's off the board, I think would be an awesome fit. But if Mayer falls to your lap at 28, just embrace it. Yeah, one more year of Tyler Boyd, and I think him leaving allows you to pay T. Higgins, and to me, like, if I can keep Burrow, Higgins, and Chase, that's the three I would want to keep versus like Burrow, Chase, and Boyd or something like that. And also, I think Trent Irwin and Michael Mayer as an aggregate could allow you to make up the production you would lose with Tyler Boyd, but also do it cheaper. So it allows you to spend money elsewhere. So this team also projects to move on from Joe Mixon. So you got to find those cost savings. So moving on from Mixon this offseason, moving on from Boyd next offseason, a pick like here with Mayer at 28 allows you to do stuff like that. Saints take Zay Flowers. Man, this would be straight up a track team. Him and Chris Olave as burners, but also guys that can kind of kick in the slot and kind of play mismatch, but also have the ability to play on the boundary. That'd be fun. I do think the Saints are going to cut Michael Thomas. That's becoming more and more apparent as time goes on that he's just going to have to be a cut casualty. So I'd rather see them add, like JSN if he fell here would be really enticing. Another big body guy, maybe you wait till round 2. Maybe at 40, you're taking a Michael Wilson, if you fall in love with his game, or you wait till the third round at 71 and take a Wilson or Cedric Tillman or someone like that. I'd like to see them keep that big body type in the rotation. But nevertheless, like Zay Flowers, Rashid Shaheed, and Chris Olave, like At this point, I just want to see Jameis Winston be the quarterback and just throw nothing but go balls because those dudes have nothing but wheels. So I'd be intrigued by this. And this, to me, best wide receiver available at this spot. He's my wide receiver 3, so wouldn't knock that pick whatsoever for New Orleans. Then you get Felix Ozama. I always have a hard time with FAU. He always tends to go way later than I intend when I'm putting together my mocks. To me, he's a day 2 edge, but fringe, late 1, and especially like a team like the Eagles or the Chiefs, I think either one of those two teams, obviously they're just playing the Super Bowl. I trust their judgment at that point. And for the Eagles, it's like you just made a trade for a speed rusher and Robert Quinn, so why not go draft a guy and get him cheaper and have 4 years of control plus the 5th-year option if you really like him? Makes a lot of sense to me. So I'd probably go B.J. Ojulari. I have Ojulari ranked a little bit ahead of Ndudi Ozama, but this edge group really comes down to flavor. Like, what are you looking for? And if you think FAU is slightly better than Ojulari, it's up to interpretation. So I don't hate you for going that way. But I think this makes a lot of sense for the Eagles. Or if you went to the Chiefs, like Felix Ozama, again, I have Ojulari ranked higher, so I prefer that fit. But if it's Ozama, who they have ranked higher, pairing him up with Karlaftis would be an awesome blend of one guy wins with power in his hands and being really violent, and one guy wins speed and bend and quickness off the edge. So I'd love to see that dichotomy there across the defensive line. But anyways, FAU to the Eagles at 30, don't hate that whatsoever. And then you get Nolan Smith here to the Chiefs. Some of the same stuff. Also a high-level run defender where I do think the Chiefs stand to get better as a team. But really, you're making an investment in a guy who is a freaky athlete and a high-end, highly touted recruit, and you're hoping that the upside hits as a pass rusher. Like I said, I think you're getting a pretty good run defender, which, again, the Chiefs could use right away. But the long-term hope here would be like Nolan Smith and George Karlaftis are your guys. Karlaftis wins with power in his hands, being violent, and then Nolan Smith kind of wins with speed and that bendiness around the end and attacking outside shoulders of offensive tackles. And he's definitely a work in progress. We haven't gotten to see it fully kind of come together as an edge rusher, but he also missed a lot of time. Didn't get to see the field a whole lot in 2021 because that entire front seven felt like it was projected the first round for Georgia. So it was hard for him to get a full-time role in the field. And then, of course, the pec injury cut his year short. If this is a guy, if he has a freaky couple of games in the college football playoff, there's no way he makes it to 31. Like, if he stays healthy and just goes on an absolute bender through the college football playoff and just starts tearing it up, this guy's top 16. Like, with plenty of confidence, I say that. So here for the Chiefs, this could be a really good potential value add here in the spot. So wouldn't hate it whatsoever. And, maybe if you keep Frank Clark around, I'm hearing that maybe that's going to be a contract restructure. Maybe they can come to terms on a pay cut. Then that trio, Nolan Smith does the early down work. He's a good run defender, as noted. And then you have Frank Clark kind of be a DPR, or maybe there's a world where you get Karlaftis, Smith, and Clark out on the field at the same time, plus you have Chris Jones. Okay, I'm intrigued, and I'd love to see that play out. But that is going to do it for my reaction to Daniel Jeremiah's latest 2023 NFL mock draft, his mock draft 2.0. What do I grade it? Brian Branch was a little bit of an iffy one for me. I don't really love the Darnell Wright pick there to Pittsburgh. What were some of the more interesting ones? Witherspoon at 10, I don't mind whatsoever. I think Rodgers goes to Vegas, so Will Levis, I don't know about that. And Tyree Wilson over Will Anderson, I don't know about that. Again, I know he's hearing it from other people, but I'm just not seeing it as all that likely. So I'll go with 81. I'll go with an 81. Still respectable, B-. So let me hear your grade for Daniel Jeremiah down below in the comments section. Whether it's a letter grade or a number grade, let me hear what you would grade Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock draft. Like if you guys enjoyed today's video, subscribe if you're new, and of course, let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and until next time, my name is Teach, and I'm signing off.